How many people in here know what SAP is? Okay, pretty good, pretty good. All right. So Brian asked me earlier, what does SAP stand for? And it stands for Systems, Applications, and Programming. But if you talk to an SAP client, they'll tell you it stands for Send Another PO. Because it's not a cheap application, right? It's a great product. I've been in the SAP space a long time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But what we're going to talk about today is master data governance and data quality using decisions for that. And I'm going to talk a lot about SAP specifically. But this can be used for any, I mean, every ERP system, enterprise resource planning, whether it's a Microsoft product or whether it's NetSuite or whether it's your homegrown system, everybody has master data challenges. So you can take this and use it across any application. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind. I'll talk a little bit about our company, Configurable Management, and then some common use cases that we see repetitively when we do implementations, some customer use cases, and I'll do a live demo of a master data request in SAP. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. I know this session is scheduled for 40 minutes. I'm an old ops guy, and so I usually talk fast, I move fast, and subconsciously I want to be on the last slide on this presentation. So that's where I'm headed. I'm headed to the last slide, so bear with me. So we are an SAP Silver partner, and I started implementing SAP in the mid-90s, so I literally have done like 30 SAP implementations. I tell people I've done everything from make lipstick to build airplanes, and I'm not lying. So all kinds of industries. And we really started specializing in process automation, data quality, application development about 2010. So anyway, that's what we do. Common use cases, master data governance is probably the most common thing we do with clients in the beginning. Not always. Sometimes a client will call because they've got a problem that they need solved. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But generally speaking, we'll start off with master data governance. We'll solve a handful of master data governance issues for clients, and then we're off doing all kinds of different things. I mean, one of the great things about this platform is if you can imagine it, you can do it, right? So how many in here are decisions developers? Hands-on. Okay. How many are in the business? How many in here are not with decisions? Okay. So we also do some robotic processing. I've got something here called active data governance. We'll talk about that when I do my demo. Capital expense requests and budget management. That's, believe it or not, you would be surprised at the number of large organizations that manage their capital budget and expenditures on an Excel spreadsheet. And do you know when you've exceeded your budget when you're doing it in Excel? When the invoice comes in. It's too late, right? And so that's a big repetitive use case for us. And then sales sample requests. We just did this, but I can see a use case for sales sample requests across industries, if you do sales and distribution of products. We had a client that came to us, oh gosh, this has probably been 5 years ago. They were a custom cabinet shop, and they were running what's called SAP Business One. So I call it QuickBooks on steroids. So it's kind of SAP's answer to NetSuite, if you will, or to Oracle's NetSuite. And they were a custom cabinet shop that had over 8 million SKUs or part numbers. And they needed a solution where their salespeople could go into home builders like Syntex Homes or Pulte Homes or any of the big guys. They build track homes, so they needed to be able to go in and say, okay, for this home model, here's the type of cabinets here's the type of wood we want, here's the type of finish we want, here's the type of hardware we want, here's the countertops we want. So they needed to be able to, on the fly, configure specific rooms, cabinets for specific rooms. And so we built them a configure price quote solution. It's been a huge success because they go in with iPads and they do a quote, and when they win the business, we create a sales order for them in SAP Business One. So when we started this project, I think we started it in like September or October one year with a single developer. It took us about 6 months. That's probably the longest project we've ever had. We were going live with their first location in April of 2018, I think. And they had 8 locations. So the goal was to have all locations rolled out by November. So we went live in April, and from April to July, they bought 5 more locations. So now we're up to 13 locations. And they were live with all 13 locations by September. So it was a huge success for them. And we've done things like vendor rebates, customer rebates, supplier warranty, return, I mean, just all kinds of different things, right? So I'm going to talk about Empire Merchants North. So Empire Merchants North is a liquor, a wine and spirits distributor in the state of New York. And they're only in New York. Pretty good size organization. They sell to restaurants, bars, hotels, nightclubs. So they needed to automate their sales sample process. They were using Excel to do sales samples. Now, if you can imagine, if you're sampling alcoholic beverages, there's a lot of rules and laws around that. And they didn't tell me this, but I suspect they may have got their hands slapped by the state of New York because something didn't go right because they were doing all this in Excel. And it was really, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to this. So they use what they call reason codes, right, for sales samples. And there's, I don't know, how many, 7 or 8, Mark? 14? Okay. So, and each reason code might need to have certain attachments. It might need to have certain questions answered. And so we made that completely configurable for them. So they can actually add reason codes. They can change reason codes, whether there's attachments required and all of that. So anyway, it was rather complex, but they needed to reduce their manual errors and mistakes and improve processing time and productivity. And then obviously strengthen compliance. So we did that for them. So as I said, they had a highly manual process. They were emailing spreadsheets around, right? So, and this is the common thing, right? The business that we're in, when we introduced email into corporations, we enabled the business community to create as many manual processes as they wanted to, right? And they lose visibility into that, obviously, right? So my experience is end users will they're like electricity, they'll take the path of least resistance. So if you give them visibility into their process, they'll use it immediately, right? So the adaption is really high. So anyway, that's what they were doing. They were using Excel. And then they were manually entering the orders into SAP once those Excel spreadsheets were approved, as they were routed through their management. So what we did is we automated all of that. So this is actually a video of their sales samples process. So they're entering a sample territory. That sample territory is actually a person in their company, right? But it's an SAP object or an object in SAP. And so an item number, think of it as a part number, right? So we're reading that data out of SAP Live when they enter a part number. And then we're doing a lot of different things, like this customer number. You'll see that there's where's my pointer? There we go. There's rules that are running errors, right? And this is just showing us, hey, we can do wildcard searches and that sort of stuff. And this is reading data live out of SAP, but again, think of it as any ERP system. And then we'll get a return list and they can select what they want. And then they're going to enter this customer number again. And one of the things we're checking, like this is a sales sample request. And this is what I talked about, where there's certain requirements depending on the reason code that they might need to fill out and attach things or whatever the case may be. But one of the things we're doing is we're checking to see if If it's a sales sample request, we're checking to see if that customer has purchased that item in the last year. Because if they have, we can't sample it to them. And there's a lot of rules like that, just various things that we check throughout the process. And so you can see here it says, hey, this item has been sold in the last 12 months. So it's a hard stop. You cannot pass go. You cannot collect $250. We're also checking minimum order quantities. For this particular one, we're saying, hey, you have to order in increments of 4. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to change the customer number to one that hasn't sold in the last few months so we can move on with the sample process. So we changed our order quantity to 4, and now we're changing our customer number to one that has not been sold in the last 12 months. Sorry, this is so slow, but hey, I have 40 minutes. Another thing we do regularly is you'll notice in the comments history up here, we time and date stamp comments and make them non-editable, right? Just so you can keep that audit trail of comments, questions, and that sort of stuff. Okay, so now we're just getting tasks assigned. And this can go through various levels of approvals, obviously, depending on the amount. There's actually a budget process behind this. Actually, when the client called, they said, hey, we want to automate this sales process, but we want to add budgeting to it. We don't have budget right now. So we're going to create this custom table in SAP so we can keep our budget there. And I'm like, no, don't do that. We can take care of all of that in decisions, right? So it helps you keep your ERP system customization down as well. So this is what they call the brand manager. This is kind of the last step in the process. But other things that can happen here is like, if it's under a certain dollar amount, we can go ahead and create the sales order. So if there's a half a dozen line items on here and 3 of them can be approved without, we go ahead and create a sales order for those 3 in SAP. We don't wait for the whole thing to be approved because they want those sales samples out as quickly as they can. So this is just showing we created the sales order in SAP for these 2 items at the last approval. And an email goes to the requester and tells them, hey, your order's, this part of your order's been approved, and so on and so forth. And then here we're just showing the sales order in SAP, that it was created accurately, and we're showing the sales reason code that they selected, which was sales rep request.
Hey Steve, what's the integration between decisions and SAP? Is it REST APIs or is it something different?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the question is, what's the integration between SAP? Our claim to fame is we know SAP really well. We built a custom module, and we connect to SAP through SAP's .NET connector. We can also use their OData services, but I will tell you, OData services is relatively new, and as with anything with SAP, when it's new, it almost works, but not quite. So you have to customize a lot of those. Yeah, no, good question. So what that does for you, by the way, that API, so we use, SAP has what they call BOPs, their programs, or remote function modules, kind of the same thing. And what we do is we're able to distill the structure of that object into decisions as a step. And so now you can map to, if you want to create a sales order or create a customer or whatever the case may be, then we can integrate directly with those they're called, we connect through remote function calls. So it's just a live call to SAP. I'll show you in the demo here in just a moment. Okay, so we are going to talk about master data governance and harmonization. Well, and that gets me to the demo. So, we market what we call decisions for SAP solutions, all right? And we can literally install in your environment and be talking to SAP in a matter of, well, if you already have decisions, we can install our module and be talking to SAP in about 20 minutes. without you installing anything in SAP at all. Now, we do have some custom code for some gaps that SAP has. We provide that to our clients if they want it at no charge. So this is just your, your typical landing page, right? And we've got some little tiles up here to keep track of how many materials are requested, how many are pending, how many have been rejected. Obviously, this is a little report, and it's driving these tiles, right? We got a little place over here for active assignments and that sort of stuff as well. So if I want a new material, so in SAP, your SKU or your part number or your item, it's called a material in SAP. A material in SAP, out of the box, has about 900 fields. And nobody uses that many fields, okay? Usually it's somewhere between 50 and 150, depending on the client and the complexity. But then there's another component to that, to SAP, they call characteristics. And so you can actually create your own custom fields without it being so custom. So it can get extremely complex. But in SAP, the material master, it's the brains of the system. If you're in manufacturing or distribution of any, if you're handling products, if you don't get this data correct, then it's a big problem for you, right? In fact, Yellow Pages went live on SAP many years ago, and they had a unit of measure error, and a person ordered a Yellow Page book, and a month later, a semi-truck pulled up with a semi-truckload of Yellow Pages. It was $1 million mistake for unit of measure issue, all right? So master data is incredibly important in any system. So when this form opened up, we went live to SAP and we read the data for all of these drop-downs. And so I could change these drop-downs. I default things because I'm lazy and I don't like to type, and I'm not a great typer. They did not hire me for my typing skills. So then, once this is what we'd call organizational structure data. Once I create that or complete that and click my submit, and by the way, I've noticed the speed here is not quite as fast as my phone hotspot. So I'm giving it a description, and obviously you get things like type ahead functionality for the drop downs, and I'll just run through a few of these. We can also, so SAP has something like they call product hierarchy, and so it's like product lines, right? And it's hierarchical in nature. So depending on which one you select, it might have 2 levels of data, or it might have 10 levels of data. So this is just a little dialogue process that goes and runs and reads SAP to figure out what is the next level and what are the items in that next level for the product hierarchy. And then it builds out the string to go into the product hierarchy field in SAP. Now, obviously, one of the strengths of decisions is business rules, right? And I mentioned active data governance earlier, right? So remember gross weight, net weight, and weight unit. So this is what is called a finished good material type in SAP, right? So we're saying, hey, the gross weight has to be, number one, it has to be completed, and it has to be greater than the net weight, right? So net weight must be less than gross weight. And we have a rule that says, hey, because this is a finished good material, it has to be either pounds or kilograms. So those are the only 2 units of measure we can use. And so when I submit this, a couple of tasks are going to get created, and sent to groups of people, and I'm in all the groups, so I don't have to, I'm lazy. I don't like to log in and out as different users and that sort of stuff. So this is just going to show us a different view of the form that's related to my persona, which in this case happens to be the planning department. So we're going to complete the data that we need for material requirements planning. and one more view. So we're only doing a couple of views. In SAP, in the real world, you'll have anywhere from 5 to 10 departments that need to contribute data to a material master record. And so the last step is we want to create this record in SAP. So we send a task to, a center of excellence or a master data team or some group of people. And you'll notice in this form that we have a post to SAP step. So up until this point, we've read data out of SAP, but we've used a system account to do that so that we didn't have to, we're sending hard-coded credentials to get that data back. But now we've got to post it to SAP. So the nice thing about the .NET connector is all SAP authorization protocols are followed. You can't circumvent the system in any way. And so we're going to SAP and we're going to create this material eventually. And we got a material number returned to us. So I'll just jump in over here to SAP real quick and show you that we did create the material. If you remember, I used DD23 as the description, and that we can show that it was actually created today by me, our servers on Central Time, and the transaction and the program that we used to create that material. So I also mentioned active data governance. So with those same business rules, and this is really, what we can, when you're talking about master data, we can ensure that you get your data in your system accurate 100% of the time. But what we can't do is control users that might go into that data and make changes to it. And maybe those changes don't follow your business rules because you don't have all those business rules in SAP, right? So what we can do is we can go query SAP for those objects, and we can identify those objects that do no longer comply to your business rules, and we can surface that data. And it's surfaced here in a report, but in the real world, what we'd do is maybe download that to Excel, and then we would email that off to one or more groups of people and say, you need to go clean this data, right? And so they can go clean the data and come back and say, I want to do a mass update or a mass create. But before we allow them to run that mass update or mass create, we can run that Excel spreadsheet through those same business rules. And if the Excel spreadsheet doesn't meet the business rules, then again, you can't do a mass, you cannot pass go and you cannot collect $250, right? So that is the end of my presentation. So I will answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Steve, how did you get into working with decisions in particular, maybe with SAP to begin with, but what's your beginning story?
So we worked with another technology for about 12 years. And the problem with the technology was, so it was a no-code, low-code technology. And what I've learned over the years is that anytime you hear the term low-code, what that means is code, right? We never implemented that technology without writing code. It didn't really have a business rules component. So anyway, it was problematic because we were marketing it as a no-code, low-code, and I believe in honesty and integrity, and so I just had an issue with it personally. So I started looking for another technology, and we ran across decisions and started, exploring the capabilities, and I really, when I first saw it and we started playing with it, I was cautiously optimistic, but because of my experience with the other company, I thought, no way can we do this with it, without code. And we worked out an agreement with Decisions to become a partner, and we integrated it with SAP. We have implemented, I don't know how many solutions over the years, but we've never written a line of code for any of it. As a matter of fact, I love to tell this story. We were at a conference July a year ago, and Mark, our director of design and delivery, we were at this SAP conference, and I said, Mark, take some time and walk around the conference and see what everybody else is doing, right? So Mark's gone for about an hour, and he comes back and he sits down beside me and he says, I haven't seen anything here we couldn't build with Decisions. And that's the power of the technology, is the fact that you're really only limited to your imagination. You can do so much. And again, no code. Other questions?
How many SAP deployments are there in the world?
There's 150,000 companies that use SAP around the globe. Anybody that's anybody uses SAP, including Apple, including Dell, Starbucks, Ford, Chevrolet, any name brand that you can mention, there's a very high probability that they have SAP in the mix somewhere. Good question. So it's a big market. Yes? How are we penetrating the base? We're going to conferences. So we've gotten our leads for 15 years through conferences. We go to conferences, we meet people. This is a strategic purchase. I tell them this is as strategic a purchase as your decision to use SAP or whatever the case may be. So it's a process, right? Because oftentimes you have to get in their budget, right? So the sales cycles can be long. In fact, I had a sales cycle that took 5 years one time. And when they decided to buy, I got a call in January, and by February I had a PO, right? So it took 5 years to get there, but once they decided to go, it was really quick. Other questions? Well, I really appreciate you guys coming to my session. Like I said, I thought it might be me and Missy, so.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Round of applause for Stephen, everybody.